You're on.
Hi, my name's Steve Sobkowski. I was born in 1943 during World War II. My father was over in Europe. He was with the Army Air Force, and I never saw him until I was 3 years old. When I was born, there was no Munson Hospital, so to speak. There was the state hospital. So my birth certificate says I was born at Munson, a division of the state hospital, which many friends think is a hilarious thing. My father was a Polish fellow from New York State, and my mother was a Pratt, who were the first settlers up here, and they met at Michigan State. He had a football scholarship, and they married just before he left for the war. And she came back here and took care of her grandmother with me. By here, I mean this house that we're in. A little bit about the Pratts. The Pratts came here in the mid-1800s to run the lighthouse. They were the first lighthouse keepers here. They were from New York State originally, and I think they were from the area that raised fruit. So they looked around and got some trees and stuck them in the ground, and they grew like a weed. And so that's how they settled, got some land here from, it's signed off by Lincoln, got some land here and planted fruit trees after the work at the lighthouse was done. After the war, my father came back, graduated from Michigan State with a degree in civil engineering, and my mother was up here, so they never even really considered going out into the world and practicing as a civil engineer, but they came up here, and he worked in the fruit industry, and we lived in the house about 100 yards from here, just south of here, the red house. My grandparents lived in this house, and they were retired from Detroit, from the Detroit area. The first memory I have of being here is when my great-grandmother died, and it was a warm day like today when she died, in a warm week, and I think they didn't use any of the measures they do today, so the smells got worse and worse, and the flowers got more and more to overcome those odors until the whole room was filled. Then on about the third or fourth day, she was removed from the house and buried here. That was my first memory that I have of living here. After a year or so up here, my brother Joe was born. So there were two brothers, and we were 3 years apart, so we were terrorists. We were the local terrorists here. We were working on the farm. My grandfather ran the farm, and he was of German heritage, so he was very strict about the correctness of how things had to be done. And we were succumbed to him. We had to work for him. We went to school right across the road here, within 100 yards of this house, for grades 1 through 5 for me. Then I moved on to Willow Hill in Traverse City and went to the Traverse City schools after that. My brother went to a Peninsula school, I think it was in the 3rd grade on, because it just opened at that time. So we rode the bus. We spent a lot of time on the buses, and there were a number of them that you could catch, just like airplane flights. if you were late on one bus, you could pick up another bus. So pretty good life. In the summer times, we worked in the fields with the cherries, and in the winter times I remember having a 48 Ford tractor that I used to plow the snow with. Pretty exciting thing for me because in those days we had a lot more snow than we do these days. I remember just about every year the snow would come up to over the top of the door into this place, and you'd have to build a little tunnel through that snow to be able to get in and out of the house. When we lived near the water here too, and so I also recall my father pushing us to go down to the dock, which was about a mile north of here. It's where Haswell Beach is. And in the morning time, we would go down with little frog spears and fins and goggles, and in 5 minutes catch about 3 feet long pieces of, or strings of perch, and then sell them to the tourists for $2, which was pretty darn good for 10-year-olds. So that kept us going in candy and things like that all summer long. The perch were so thick in those days that you couldn't see above your waist if you were in the water underneath the dock. It was just an amazing sight to see. In the springtime, in the fall time, too, you'd see the big waste fish, what are they called? Oh, carps. You'd see carps all over in the bay, mating and just carrying on. Another thing in those days, the only deer around here were in the upper peninsula of Michigan. That had no problem with deer when you grew things at all. So it was a different kind of world then. I don't remember it being less crowded or less populated than it is now so much. I'm sure it is, but it was about the same, it seemed like about the same number of people. Because of distance, we had a hard time getting in to carry on a normal dating life when that time came, so any girls that were within 5 miles of here were prime candidates for us. As I went through high school, I always thought of being an engineer because my father was one. So when the time came in 1961, I graduated from high school, and I applied at Michigan State and got into their engineering school. A professor there was a professor from my father too. His name was Leo Nostine, and I remember that I was in his course and he asked me if to stand up, and he said, "Is your dad Len Sobkowski?" And I said, "Yes." And my grades instantly went from like a C- to a pretty good number after that, because it instilled a pride in me that I'm studying that I think a lot of people don't have these days. You have to really encourage people to do the things they do well. I think it needs to have a little starting point like that. After I got out of school, never occurred to me to stay up here. I married a girl from Chicago, Nikki Sobkowski here, and we went first to Seattle, and then during my working career, which was from, say, the mid-20s until I was mid-50s, we moved 13 times in our career, and I consider that a very good experience, because it shows you can get along just about anywhere, and meet people and have a good experience just about anywhere. In the back of our heads, though, I think we always thought of coming back here to live. So around the year 2000, we were living in Las Vegas, Nevada, and my wife saw an opening for a job at Ferris State as an assistant dean. So I retired and moved to Big Rapids, and then 2 years later my mother took ill, so I came up here to take care of her, and then when Nikki retired about 2 years later, she moved up here, and we've had a very good life here. We've got good friends, and take a vacation when it's super cold, but I think we enjoy ourselves most of the season here. There are still Pratts around here, but we don't see them that often, but we have a lot of people that ask about that. So we've renamed the orchard Pratt Farms, and we have people that come up, I remember from times like before World War II, to work on the cherries and the fruits when they were teenagers, little kids, and they'll drive up to the house and they'll tell us this story, that was the best time of their lives when they were up here, and how they really admired the Pratts and Altenbergs for giving them this opportunity. They'd live in the house and they'd get fed by them and paid for the cherries. So we've always made it a practice to try and do the same thing, and I find that to be very enjoyable for me, to take a kid, say a city kid, and show him the work and work with him or her, and see them enjoy the changes that they make in the orchards. The only difference I see between the past and now is that the work day starts much later than it did for us when we were kids. I can't really think of anything else to say.
Okay, great.